Once again, for those of you who will need translation device or SIS, you are kindly invited to use it, available on your seat. And last but not least, lost and found items. You can recollect the lost and found items at the help desk in front of this ballroom. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am very honored to be given the opportunity to introduce to you an inspiring leader from Asia, His Excellency Yoon Suk-yeol, President of Republic of Korea. Sorry.
쉰탁 함단이 B20 의장님, 그리고 전 세계에서 오신 기업인 여러분 반갑습니다. 대한민국과 특별한 인연이 있는 B20 서밋에서 여러분과 함께하게 돼서 매우 기쁘게 생각합니다. 여러분들께서도 잘 아시겠지만 G20 정상회의와 연계해서 개최되는 B20 서밋은 2010년 G20 서울 정상회의를 계기로 시작됐습니다. B20는 당시 글로벌 금융위기를 극복하는 과정에서 각국 정부 간의 협력뿐 아니라 기업 간의 협력도 매우 중요하다는 인식에서 출범했습니다. 이제는 글로벌 이슈에 대한 민간 소통 채널로서 확고하게 자리매김을 했습니다. 기업인 여러분, 저는 오늘 여러분께 글로벌 복합 위기 극복을 위한 기업의 역할, 그리고 디지털 전환 시대의 글로벌 협력에 대해 말씀드리겠습니다. B20 서밋이 출범한 후에 지금 10년이 지났습니다. 세계 경제는 또 다시 복합 위기에 직면해 있습니다. 역사적으로 볼 때 글로벌 경제 위기는 반복돼 왔지만 각각의 위기는 조금씩 다른 모습을 보여왔습니다. 현재 우리가 직면한 위기는 2008년 글로벌 금융 위기나 2020년 팬데믹 위기와는 그 양상과 대응 방식에서 다른 모습을 가지고 있습니다. 2008년 글로벌 금융 위기는 금융 시스템의 붕괴로 인해서, 또 2020년 팬데믹 위기는 방역을 위한 봉쇄 조치로 인해 총 수요가 급격히 위축되면서 세계 백신 공급 등을 주도하며 위기에 대응했습니다. 하지만 이번 위기는 수요 측 요인보다는 공급 측 충격이 크게 작용했습니다. 팬데믹 회복 과정에서의 공급망 차질, 그리고 다양한 지정학적 갈등이 복합적으로 작용해서 생산 비용은 올라가고 공급 역량은 축소됐습니다. 따라서 위기에 대응하는 해법 역시 공급 측면에서 찾아야 하면서 정부의 역할 또한 바뀌어야 됩니다. 저는 늘 민간 주도 시장 중심으로 경제 시스템을 전환해서 경제 체질을 강화함으로써 위기를 극복할 수 있다고 믿고 또 이를 강조해 왔습니다. 기업의 투자를 제약하는 규제를 과감하게 혁신하고 기업하기 좋은 환경을 조성하기 위해 노력해 왔습니다. 불효불급한 정부 지출은 과감하게 줄이고 재정 건전성을 회복하고 재정이 민간 부문을 구축하지 않도록 해야 된다는 것이 제 믿음입니다. 아울러 기업이 독자적으로 감당하기 어려운 과학기술에 대한 R&D 투자와 첨단 산업 분야의 인재 양성을 위한 지원을 정부는 크게 늘려가고 있습니다. 기업인 여러분, 저는 현재의 글로벌 여건 속에서 민간이 중심이 되는 공급 측 혁신의 핵심은 바로 디지털 전환에 달려 있다고 생각합니다. 디지털 기술이 기존의 산업 데이터와 결합하며 비용 절감과 동시에 새로운 가치를 창출해 나가는 과정에서 끊임없이 새로운 비즈니스가 발생하고 있습니다. 한국 정부가 추진하고 있는 민간 주도 성장에서도 가장 역점을 두고 있는 부분이 바로 디지털 전환입니다. 디지털 기업들이 아날로그 시대의 규제에 발목 잡히지 않도록 낡은 규제를 혁신하고 자율 규제를 원칙으로 하는 비즈니스 친화적인 디지털 규제 환경을 만들어 가고 있습니다. 또 디지털 시대에 필요한 인재를 육성하기 위해 교육, 직업훈련 개혁에도 착수했습니다. 인공지능, 차세대 통신, 사이버 보안과 같은 핵심 디지털 분야의 기술 개발도 집중적으로 지원하고 있습니다. 특히 한국 정부는 이른바 디지털 플랫폼 정부를 역점 과제로 추진해서 민간 주도로 공공 서비스의 품질을 획기적으로 높이고 정부의 데이터와 민간의 서비스가 결합해서 새로운 가치가 창출되는 환경을 만들어가고 있습니다. 한편 디지털 기술을 활용한 공급 측 혁신을 통해 인류의 삶이 더욱 풍요로워지려면 디지털 공간에서도 보편적 가치 구현에도 힘을 쏟아야 합니다. 저는 지난 9월 뉴욕의 UN 총회에 참석한 계기에 NYU 대학에서 자유, 연대, 인권과 같은 인류의 보편 가치가 디지털 세계에서도 실현될 수 있도록 새로운 디지털 질서를 만들고 지켜나가는데 전 세계가 동참해 나가야 한다고 제안한 바 있습니다. 디지털 생태계는 누구에게나 개방되고 누구나 디지털 데이터에 공정하게 접근해서 사용할 수 있어야 한다고 생각합니다. 저는 B20가 이러한 글로벌 디지털 질서를 논의할 수 있는 최적의 공론장이라고 생각합니다. 이번 B20 서밋에서는 디지털 비즈니스를 주도하는 많은 기업들이 참여하고 있습니다. 디지털 세계를 누구보다 잘 이해하고 있고 동시에 바람직한 디지털 질서를 만들어 나가야 할 책임이 우리 모두에게 있습니다. 국경을 초월해서 누구도 소외되지 않고 디지털 시대의 혜택을 공유할 수 있도록 B20가 중심이 돼서 인류가 공감하는 디지털 질서를 정립해 나가기를 기대합니다. 한국 정부는 새로운 디지털 질서의 구축을 위한 G20 차원의 논의를 선도하고 B20와 G20가 긴밀한 협의를 통해 이를 구현해 나가도록 적극 지원하겠습니다. 전 세계 기업인 여러분, 민간 주도의 공급 측 혁신으로 글로벌 복합 위기를 극복하기 위해서는 각국 정부 간의 협력뿐만 아니라 민간과 정부 간 협력, 또 민간 부분 간의 협력도 조화롭게 이루어져야 합니다. 이를 위해서는 B20의 역할과 위상에도 큰 변화가 필요합니다. B20는 출범 당시 글로벌 기업들의 의견을 모아서 G20를 통해 정부 간 국제 공조를 돕는 역할을 수행해 왔습니다. 이번 G20 정상회의에도 디지털 무역의 활성화, 또 글로벌 공급망의 포용성 강화 등 그간 논의해온 다양한 협력 의제들을 제안한 것으로 알고 있습니다. 그러나 이제는 B20 고유의 글로벌 비즈니스 협력 의제를 발굴할 뿐 아니라 B20를 매개로 하는 기업 간 파트너십을 더 강력하게 구축해야 할 때가 됐습니다. 이를 통해 B20가 글로벌 공급 측 혁신을 위한 다층적 협력의 핵심 축으로 자리매김하기를 바랍니다. 대한민국은 글로벌 리더 국가로서 B20의 적극적인 역할을 응원하고 지원하겠습니다. 이번 글로벌 복합 위기를 빠르게 극복하고 위기 이후에 세계가 비약적으로 도약할 수 있도록 함께 지혜를 모아 나갑시다. 감사합니다, 여러분.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Republic of Korea, His Excellency Mr. Yoon Suk-yeol. Ladies and gentlemen, apart from the President of the Republic of Korea, we'll be having 3 other state leaders speaking on the stage later. The President of the Republic of Indonesia, the Prime Minister of Canada, and the Prime Minister of Australia. And we're also going to take a listen to what Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, in her capacity as UN Secretary General Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development, has to say, as well as actress Anne Hathaway in her capacity as UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, speaking about unlocking the full potential of women in the economy. And later, we will have also the Minister of State for Foreign Trade of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Thani bin Ahmed Al Zayudi. But I'd like to take you back to the previous sessions, as we had many inspiring speakers and also inspiring leaders sharing to us, especially for those of you who has just joined the second day of B20 Summit just now after the break. And we had earlier, we had Mr. Jeff Bezos and Professor Klaus Schwab that we will later share to you again about what we have gained from both persons. But now, the set is ready for the next session. Now we move on to another keynote address touching upon the importance of driving global partnership to accelerate energy transition. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Minister of State for Foreign Trade of the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Thani bin Ahmed Al Zayudi.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon to you all. May I begin by convening the greetings and regards of the leadership of the UAE to the Republic of Indonesia and its people, and applaud your nation's presidency of the G20 over the last year. It's my pleasure to be back in Bali and addressing you at this important forum. The B20 Summit plays a vital role in connecting the insights, experiences, expertise of the business community to the policy agendas of the global bodies and governments. The private sector in G20 countries remain the principal driver of the global trade. Collectively, they represent 75% of the all cross-border commerce. They also make up 54% of the UAE's non-oil trade, which has a value of $281.1 billion. It's in the real world of commerce and consumption that ideas are tested, battle-hardened, and either refined or rejected. And it is why the input of the private sector is so critical to drive long-term transformational changes. Today, there are a few changes quite as critical as energy transition, both as a means to ensure access to energy sources for growing global population and adhere to our commitments to the Paris Agreement. The math is simple, as it's daunting to ensure global temperature don't rise by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2100. We need to reduce emission by 50% by 2030. And according to the United Nations, this will require cumulative investments of more than $24 trillion into energy transition technologies over the upcoming 27 years. Alongside the financial investment, there will also need to be a comprehensive policy approach that balances the competing needs of business, society, and environment, especially in the developing world. During G20 summits in Rome last year, it was made clear that not enough is being done, that we are already falling well short of our targets. And as we emerge from global pandemic and confront the growing threats of recession, it's important that our short-term needs for growth does not overwhelm our long-term commitment to the planet. As such, multilateral approach that harness the public, private, and academic sectors across the world are now required. This simply is not an issue that can be tackled in isolation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the United Arab Emirates believes it can offer an important voice in this conversation. As a major oil producer, we have been engaged in energy transition since our foundation as a nation in 1971. For us, it means not only switching from one supply to another, but reimagining the very fundamental of our economy. And just as the oil and gas industry now contributes less than 28% of our total GDP, it's our ambition that hydrocarbon will be less than half of our energy mix by 2050. We are already making strong progress. According to the Green Fuel Index, the UAE has increased our renewable energy capacity more than any other countries in the world over the last 10 years, thanks to the facilities such as Sheikh Hamad Rashid Al Maktoum Solar Park in Dubai, world's largest single solar facility. We now produce the cheapest commercial scale solar power in the planet. In 2009, we commissioned the Middle East's first peaceful nuclear program, and today Baraka plant in Abu Dhabi is saving 5 million tons of CO2 every year. It's perhaps no surprise that Abu Dhabi, our capital, was chosen as the global headquarters of IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency. Importantly, these capabilities are forming a new form of energy exports from the Gulf. The UAE now has the means and knowledge to catalyze energy transition in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. We have now invested $50 billion in clean energy projects in 70 nations across 6 continents, and continue to partner with countries around the world to increase capacity wherever it's needed. Just last week, the UAE and United States of America signed a partnership for accelerating clean energy, which will invest $100 billion to deploy 100 gigawatts of clean energy by 2035. At COP last week, we announced a joint venture to build a 10 gigawatt onshore wind farm in Egypt, capable of offsetting 23.8 million tons of carbon dioxide. This follows our other huge international partnerships, including a pioneering projects between the UAE, Israel, and Jordan to trade solar power electricity for drinking water, and investments in hydrogen production in both UK and Africa. This partnership's approach can be seen right here in Indonesia. In 2021, Masdar, the UAE Renewable Energy Pioneers, and Indonesia PJPI joined forces to construct 145 megawatt Serata floating solar planet, the first in Indonesia. Energy transition is also a key component of our new foreign trade agenda, launched last September last year. Our comprehensive economic partnership agreements are creating a new platform for joint ventures and investments in solar, hydrogen, and wind, and sparking research and developments into other critical areas such as water and food security. In July this year, we signed CEPA with Indonesia, a landmark deal that will remove and reduce tariffs on 90% of product lines, remove unnecessary barriers of trade, and create a framework for investments. These measures will help push the value of bilateral trade between UAE and Indonesia from 3 billion to beyond 10 billion within 5 years. The UAE-Indonesia CEPA is building on firm foundations. In the first 9 months of 2022, non-oil trade reached $2.8 billion, 33% growth on the same period, 2021. And since 2019, we have concluded agreements with combined value of $32 billion, many of them, as we have mentioned, in renewable energy. We have added to these bilateral agreements here in Bali with 16 new MOUs covering sectors on diverse as aviation, healthcare, electricity, mobility solutions, and many others. Ladies and gentlemen, it's this broad-based multilateral approach that can be applied to a range of issues, and it's clear that our net zero commitments are not in opposition to the growth objective that can help catalyze them. And many of the investment community already agree. The Global Greenfields Investment Trends Report from 2020 says that renewable energy received $85.2 billion across 466 projects in 2021, making it is the biggest single recipient of FDI. The current energy supply crisis is a point of concern, but it should be a moment of realization. We already have many of the solutions at our fingertips. What we need to do now is mobilize the capital to begin these projects where they are needed. It is, I fully believe, the ultimate win-win investment. We in the UAE are ready to work with the international community to unlock these opportunities and deliver the best possible retain sustainable access to clean energy. Looking forward to work with many of you and enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The minister said the country commissioned the Middle East's first peaceful nuclear program, and today the Berkolaborasi nuclear plant in Abu Dhabi is saving 5 million tons of CO2 every year. And there's a coordination and collaboration as well with the Indonesian government. The UAE has means and also knowledge to catalyze energy transition in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, including in Indonesia, in which 145 megawatt Cirata floating solar plant was jointly constructed in 2021 by PGBR and Masdar, the UAE's renewable energy pioneer. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's now move on to the next session. I am pleased and honored to share with you that we have a very special speaker, as we mentioned earlier, Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands. Queen Maxima has served as the United Nations Secretary General's Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development, or the UNSGSA, since 2009. As a special advocate, she is a leading global voice on advancing universal access to and responsible usage of affordable, effective, and safe financial services. The UNSGSA raises awareness, serves as a convener, encourages leaders, and supports actions to expand financial inclusion at a global and country level, all in close collaboration with partners from the public and also private sectors. Thus, here presenting to you on the topic of enabling digital transformation to promote financial inclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Her Majesty Queen Maxima.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to join with you virtually and to support Indonesia's B20 presidency. I thank you for this opportunity to put financial inclusion at the heart of our discussions. These are difficult times for people everywhere, and we're all seeking new ways to tackle the challenges before us, from COVID to conflict to inflation to climate change. Inclusive finance offers new opportunities to build resilience, weather shocks, and invest in a more prosperous future. Over the last decade, a quarter of the world's adult population has gained access to financial services. Today, 76% of adults globally are now financially included. In my work as the UN Secretary General Special Advocate, I have seen the remarkable difference that inclusive digital infrastructure, in concert with digital financial services, make for people and small businesses. From Jakarta to East Africa, millions of small merchants are now paid and making payments with their own phones, transforming their ability to invest. During the COVID pandemic, governments from Brazil to Togo sent emergency digital payments directly to vulnerable households at unprecedented speed. But we should move beyond payments. A broad range of financial services, such as savings, insurance, and credit, are needed for individuals, households, and SMEs to fully benefit from the digital economy. We also need continued commitment to put in place a digital financial infrastructure that is inclusive, safe, and equitable. Greater connectivity and digital IDs allow access to financial services for millions previously left behind. Fair competition and interoperable payment systems help markets work better for even the smaller scale customers. Cybersecurity, consumer protection, data governance, and digital literacy help marginalized communities navigate these services in ways that really work for them. India offers a good example with the India Stack, which combines ID cards, a payment interface, and account aggregators in one easily accessible platform. Peru and Estonia have shown how smaller countries can also have digital IDs, payments, and e-governance use cases to build digital stacks that really work for all. Public-private collaborations are key for innovation and scale. Indonesia's digital unemployment assistance programs, Kartu Prakerja, has demonstrated how partnering with digital training institutes, job platforms, online marketplaces, and fintechs helped support over 11 million beneficiaries. This includes building skills to start businesses or find employment, while providing cash assistance directly to the e-wallet in their mobile phones. Private-private partnerships that provide services across entire value chains is also crucial, especially for SMEs. There are many examples of fintechs creating digital ecosystems to help small businesses digitize their inventory management, marketing, payments, credit, and sales. Suddenly, these SMEs leap forward and connect to larger markets beyond the brick-and-mortar presence. Critical here is the transparency in the collection, sharing, and usage of customers' and SMEs' data. Most customers grant consent without reading the terms and conditions, which are often long and hard to comprehend. Individuals and businesses often do not know the value of the data they create. And even if they do, they find it difficult to assert their rights or benefit from the value in the form of better products or lower costs. This is urgent, as platform-based businesses increasingly explore using customers' data footprints to embed financial services in social media, e-commerce, and entertainment platforms. During today's summits, you will be able to discuss all these important issues. So, let us ask, how can we finance, design, and govern this digital stack infrastructure in a more inclusive way? How can we empower individuals and SMEs with their own data? And how can public-private and private-private collaborations further take advantage of these digital transformation possibilities to provide services to the vulnerable, as well as enable them to benefit from the digital economy? It will require action from all stakeholders, especially the many leaders from the business, policy, and financial sectors here today, from Indonesia G20 countries and around the world. Your role is crucial. I wish you every success in your efforts to create a digital financial system which really benefits everyone.
Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, a very important message. Financial services, because we need savings, insurance, and also credits that are needed by individuals, households, and MSMEs to fully benefit from the digital economy. And we also need to put in place a digital financial infrastructure that is inclusive, safe, and equitable. And it's really a pride moment for Indonesians that she mentioned about the pre-employment card, or in Indonesia we call as Kartu Prakerja, because personally, it was very close to me, Kartu Prakerja. I was assigned to host and also MC the launch of Kartu Prakerja, or the pre-employment card. And that Kartu Prakerja just started like months. But then the pandemic hit, and the government need to act fast and adjust and also transform Kartu Prakerja into assistance fund. So the card that was supposedly designed for assistance, for entrepreneurship, for retraining, upskilling, then was transformed into assistance fund. And that was a proof of the agility of the government of Indonesia in transforming that facility into something that people can rely on to survive during a very difficult time during the pandemic. And I believe that many governments and also many business leaders did the same agility into their country, into their business, to save lives, because we were facing difficulties back then. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we need to do some adjustment about the scheduling. I would like to invite now Anne Hathaway to remind us about how important equality is and how important women's role in making our life better, and the importance of women to be given the same opportunity. Please welcome Anne Hathaway.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to speak to you today as a goodwill ambassador for UN Women. Women's participation and equal power is fundamental to progress for everyone. I'm sure you are aware of the evidence which shows conclusively that equality between women and men make us all safer, happier, more prosperous, and more successful. And yet, the reality in which we find ourselves is that at the current rate of progress, it may take another 300 years to achieve gender equality. I hope we all agree this is 3 centuries too long. It is going to take more than hope to get us to a better future. Our current position is far from good. Progress for women and girls is in dramatic reverse in many countries. Rights and freedoms that women and girls had experienced as normal, to work, to learn, to make choices about their bodies, have been abruptly taken away. Some of those losses have been legislated or imposed by governing authorities against courageous resistance. Others have been brought to light and sharpened by unprecedented global crises, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic had a devastating impact on us all, but it hit women especially hard. There is a frightening intensification of domestic violence against women. Another threat to women's safety was the seismic loss of economic opportunities. Millions of women left the workforce in 2020. They lost their jobs at faster rates than men and have stayed out of the job market longer. And now, as fuel and food prices rise globally, amidst the climate emergency and sustained military conflicts, women's incomes, as well as their contributions to businesses' success and the recovery of markets, matter even more than ever. Ironically, the pandemic also showed us just how much our future progress depends on the skills and leadership of women. Women sustained our healthcare systems and invented life-saving vaccines. As leaders of countries, they gave us some of the most effective responses to the pandemic. And yet, We show time and time again that we do not equally value women's participation, contribution, and leadership. This year, in 169 countries and areas, that's most of the world, women's labor force participation is expected to stay below pre-pandemic levels. What can we attribute this to? Well, it's my regret to share with you that during the pandemic, women did an additional 512 billion hours of unpaid care work at home. While I let that statistic sink in, I would like to acknowledge the essential importance of care. Care is fundamental to the basic functioning of our economies and societies, and I'm not meaning to suggest otherwise. In fact, the reality is, everyone will need care at some point in their life. However, we must also recognize the reality that the current way care is provided and valued is unfair and unsustainable. We must address the cultural biases that automatically label care as women's work. Even before the pandemic, women spent more than 3 times as many hours as men on unpaid care and domestic work. It was unfair then, it's worse now. It's time to admit that something is very, very off. Whether or not we mean to, the fact is, we are taking advantage of women. Simply put, we must stop penalizing women for caring. We must stop relying on women to make it work and instead proactively make possible, support, and fairly compensate care work. UN Women has observed the care that's appreciated and properly valued in all its form is a critical missing link in unlocking the full potential of women in the economy and in society, which is, of course, the same thing as unlocking the full potential of everyone in the economy and society. Governments, businesses, and civil society can all play a role in this. UN Women would like to propose these practical and immediate actions. Ask governments to support care services, pay the taxes that fund them, prioritize the creation of family-friendly workplaces which include flexible working hours, paid parental leave, and in-house childcare facilities. This is a moment when we must urgently act not only to restore what has been lost for women and girls, but to end the harmful status quo which keeps inequality thriving. The stakes simply couldn't be higher. The world, not just women, needs innovative solutions more than ever. Optimizing inclusivity is our best chance at success. This esteemed group, which I am honored to address today, find themselves tasked with making decisions that shape lives. I urge you, put women at the heart of economic growth and recovery. Be the architects of a better future by doing what no one else has effectively done before. Prioritize women for the good of all. Thank you.
That was a very powerful message from Anne Hathaway, UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, unlocking the full potential of women in the economy. And one of the most interesting points that I think was pointed out by Ms. Hathaway was that women and men suffer more during the pandemic, but women suffer more. And we're taking advantage of women, and we penalize women for caring. So we need to change and put women on priority for the better good of all. It is really consistent with the B20 legacies that was kicked off yesterday, or was inaugurated yesterday. One Global Women Empowerment, or OGWE, aggregating existing capacities and networks to accelerate and scale impactful women empowerment efforts globally. And the objective of the B20 Legacy One Global Women Empowerment that was inaugurated or strengthened yesterday was that to facilitate the acceleration of impactful inclusion of women in businesses in the global economy by providing digital capability, knowledge sharing, funding and investment, technical support, and supportive policies. And hopefully, the B20 legacies can be translated into actions and will benefit women in general. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed to the next session. This is to announce a special B20 initiatives on green transition through the Green EV Fund cooperation that has been supported by the B20 Finance and Infrastructure Task Force. Just a bit of a background that we will witness a signing ceremony of $2 billion of Green EV Fund to invest in the end-to-end value chain of the EV ecosystem across sectors to achieve climate goals. We are still waiting for our speakers as well as the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, but the presentation and also the signing ceremony will give us an idea about several things. Firstly, is about why we invest in the EV value chain. This is a very critical question to answer, and later our speaker will explain about 5 different reasons why we need to invest in EV. First and foremost is that global trend of increasing environmental awareness is on the rise, and fundamental cost and technology improvements, as what Professor Schwab said earlier, that the cost of technology will decrease eventually, including for cleaner energy. And the third is exponential growth in the global EV market. And the reason number 4 being $1 trillion opportunity in the electrification of transportation. And last but not least, emerging EV market in Indonesia with supportive fundamentals. Later, the speaker, Mr. Rida, will explain more about that, but now I would like to welcome all the delegates who have just come to the main ballroom. And we're still waiting for the Finance Minister, Ibu Sri Mulyani, but we will start the procession or the signing ceremony once she arrives. And we will also answer questions, why is it so attractive to invest in the EV sector in Indonesia? So yesterday, if you joined the first day, there was a bit of rivalry between Ministers of Energy, Minister of Tourism, and also Minister of Health, arguing about which is the most lucrative, which is the most financially feasible to invest in. Is it in the health sector? Is it in the tourism sector? Or is it in the energy sector? But this session would argue that it is also important to invest in the EV clean energy sector because of some of the benefits that we will gain, not only us as investors, but also the earth and our generation. Now we would like to welcome Bapak Erick Thohir, His Excellency Mr. Erick Thohir, the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises, or in Indonesia we call it BUMN. Thank you so much, Pak Erick, for coming. And for this ceremony, we're still waiting for the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani. And the reason being, ladies and gentlemen, why Indonesia is attractive for capturing the EV investment opportunity, because the country is an emerging global nickel hub, as we learned from the previous
action drives.
I would like to invite on stage the moderator, Mr. Bob Sternvels, Global Managing Director of McKinsey & Company, Mr. Alan Job, CEO of Unilever, Ms. Kathleen Quirk, President of Freeport McMoran Inc., Ms. Mari Elka Pangestu, Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnership of the World Bank, and Mr. Roy Gorey, CEO of Manulife. Well, turns out we still need to wait yet again for the next session for panel discussion.
Welcome. They're the world's largest copper company, and Kathleen spent over 30 years at Freeport. Before this, she was CFO from 2003 to 2022. So welcome, Kathleen. Marie Pangestu, welcome, Marie. Marie is the Managing Director of Policy Development and Partnership at the World Bank. We're just sorting out some logistics here. But before joining the World Bank, Marie was the Minister of Tourism and Trade from 2004 to 2011 here in Indonesia, and the Minister of Trade from 2004 to 2011, and the Minister of Tourism from 2011 to 2014. So thank you, Marie. And finally, but not least, we have Roy Gorey, who's the President and CEO of Manulife. Welcome. It's Canada's largest insurance company and one of the world's largest asset management companies. But Roy also has a deep commitment to Asia, and before becoming CEO in 2017, was Manulife CEO for Asia, starting in 2015. So welcome. You're also on the board of the Business Council for Canada and a member of the Geneva Association. So we're going to have an action-packed set of conversations. Before we start, I thought I'd just offer a few thought starters to get us going. And I think we'd agree that there's no more time for inclusive growth than now. And there are challenges independently, inclusion and growth. But the argument that I'm going to make is the time for thinking about this as an and. Growth with inclusion is no more important than today. Let me hit a highlight across a couple of them. We've made remarkable progress on inclusion over the past 30 years. And the number of people living in extreme poverty has decreased by 70% since 2000. That's a remarkable accomplishment. But inequity still exists. Inequity still exists. 8 out of 10 people on the planet live in societies where the income gap is widening. From the pandemic alone, we've had massive implications. Over 170 million people in Asia since 2020 fell into poverty. 170 million people. And women in particular have been hit hard by the pandemic. They represent 30% of the global workforce, but we're 54% of the dislocated since the pandemic. Now, we did some work in McKinsey Global Institute to say, what if we really get this right? What could inclusive growth mean? And I'll just throw out a bit of a tagline, which is there's an opportunity by providing more inclusion to healthcare to add 45 billion years of life on this planet in this decade, to add 11 trillion to our global economy just by focusing on women's equality. And we can add 812 million workers to the global workforce in India and Africa alone by 2050. Some of the ideas that I think we'll talk about as we go through this are going to be things like the power of upskilling, the role of equitable compensation, the role that SMEs play, and how we provide access for all. I'm going to let the panelists take us into that in more detail, but without further ado, I'd love to jump in to these topics. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Bob.
Alan, maybe I can start with you if that's okay. You're sitting closest to me, so you get to jump in. And one of the themes that I've heard you talk about often is this notion of a living wage. Help us understand what you mean by that and how it relates to this topic of inclusion.
Sure. Salamat pagi, Excellencies, Ibu Sri, distinguished guests. Thank you very much for allowing us to be here. Not everybody may know what a living wage is. It is simply enough money for a family to be able to feed, clothe, house, and educate themselves. And we think it's a reasonable expectation that in society we would want people to be able to do that. So a number of years ago, Unilever set about saying, do we pay all of our people a fair living wage? And it turned out we did not. It took us 3 years to get to a position where we could say with confidence, everyone in Unilever earns a fair living wage. We then last year committed that by 2030, everyone in our value chain, all our suppliers, we will require to pay their employees a fair living wage if they would like to do business with Unilever. And that extends our reach from hundreds of thousands of people to millions of people. And the rationale is as follows. First of all, employees who are paid properly are more likely to stay, demonstrate higher levels of productivity, but more importantly, it creates prosperous societies, societies that have got the capacity to buy the kind of products and brands that Unilever sells. So this is not just a moral imperative, it's a business imperative. Secondly, we know that growing wages, a fair living wage, helps contribute overall to economic growth. In fact, for every 1% increase in base wages, you get a 0.5% increase in retail consumption, which is a dramatic multiple of the investment. And third, but perhaps most importantly, socially inclusive growth is also environmentally inclusive growth. Because the deforestation that's happening around the world is largely not the consequence of the advanced industrial complex, it's the result of impoverished people living next to high-value rainforests and peatlands having to destroy nature and the environment in order to feed their families. So we are unequivocally, we're all in on a fair living wage or a fair living income by 2030 for everyone in Unilever's value chain to drive consumption, to drive economic growth, and to protect the environment.
Super. Thank you, Alan. Let me, Marie, can I turn to you? And you know, in my opening, I talked about how the pandemic had really been unfair to women, disproportionately hit in terms of job dislocation. And as we look forward, when we think about the challenge of meeting the talent requirements we have over this decade, the opportunity for inclusion when we think about women, women-led businesses, how do we unleash this opportunity and not let the dislocation from the pandemic set us behind?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Selamat siang, Ibu Sri Mulyani, dan selamat siang kepada semua teman-teman. Good afternoon to everybody. That's a very good question. Besides job losses, so I think just to recap what happened during the pandemic and how it had a bigger impact on women than men. First, it was that most of the health workers were women, so they were more affected. Second, the health services in many developing countries were very focused on the pandemic. So women's health services were also not being delivered. So you had higher, maternal mortality and so on, and a lot of impact on women. Third, gender-based violence increased. Fourth, women were more likely to lose jobs because they had to stay home to take care of their children who are not going to school or the elderly parents. And women, this is based on data, and women-owned businesses were also more likely to shut down. One of the reasons is because women-owned business, a lot of companies that were able to survive during the pandemic was because they could adapt to digital technology. But our findings were that women-owned businesses were less able also to, adapt to digital technology. So that shows you, in a way, that was what happened during the pandemic, but they also reflect the issues that women have faced. And I think moving forward, during the pandemic, we had to be very conscious about designing the policies in the response to the pandemic to make sure that we do not further or reverse the progress we had made in reducing the gender gap. So you got to make sure the health services to women were delivered. Oh, there was one more data that I found really quite heartbreaking. Women, because your income fell, you eat less. And women were eating less because they were, giving the food to the family rather than to themselves. So that was another heartbreaking, and that's why you need to have the social protection program pay attention to these differences, right? So that's during the pandemic. So moving forward, what we should do is, of course, we are just designing our new gender strategy, so I can say it. Women is about the economy. Yeah, okay, equality and reducing the gender gap is about right of women, but it's also about the economy. And you mentioned some numbers. Was it 11 trillion? Yeah, 11 that could trillion. Be saved, that could be gained. Labor force participation of women is about 50% compared to men at 80% in today's age, right? And in some regions like the Middle East, it's like 20-30%. In Asia, it's a little bit better, closer to 60%, but it's still less than men, right? And you are not employing the productive workforce that you could have, right? And that is the 11 trillion. And I had another statistic here, 172 trillion if you had paid the difference in lifetime earnings between men and women, right? So that's the kind of the broader economic numbers. But then you've got to make sure that you have a gender strategy that is from the whole lifetime from a girl to woman. That means equal rights to nutrition, to the mother when they are still pregnant, whether to make sure that they deliver the healthy babies, and education, equal access to education. And then equal access to job opportunities, legal rights for the ownership of assets, and having the training and the upskilling of the know-how so that they can also be, not in a disadvantaged position. So skills training, especially digital, financial inclusion. I know that you're big on financial inclusion. I mean, financial services to women. And there's a whole lot of things there which are partly our finding, basically, in a nutshell. We have this publication called Women, Business and the Law, and we monitor the kind of regulations and laws that discriminate against women, whether for job opportunity or for financial inclusion or ownership of assets. That, if you can do a lot of stuff, reforms there, which was happened in the Middle East, and something very simple like in Saudi Arabia, allowing women to travel by themselves. You know, we take that so much for granted, but allowing they deregulated and reformed. One regulation was women can travel on their own. That led to the increase of labor force participation from 20 to 30%. Still very low, yeah? But still, I just give you an example on that. But I think there's also a cultural aspect that needs to also be addressed. And you have to really understand why is the labor force participation low? And is it the regulation? What is it that you need to address? And the final thing I would say is that things we take for granted, safe transportation for women. You know, I was very amazed, why is it so low in the Middle East? And one of the answers was not being able to travel safely to their place of work, was not allowing women to be able to work, or safe place to work, things like that. These are things that we have to really work with the private sector. We have the private sector here from many countries. You know, having the conducive place of work for women is another important aspect. I probably talked too long, but I've given you at least what's in my head.
Not at all. And I think the notion that really sticks with me is tackling this in a systems-based way, yes, as opposed to, is there one piece, looking across the entire system. But what also stuck with me is the enormous upside of getting this right. So thank you. You mentioned financial inclusion along the way, and Roy, maybe I can pick this up with you. I hope you're an advocate of the power that financial markets can bring, given what you do. But I'd love to pick on this notion of, as you think about financial inclusion, what are the opportunities, challenges there, given what you've seen over your career?
Yeah, great, thanks, Bob. And it's great to be back in Indonesia, and it's great to be back doing this in person again after having been stuck in our basements for 2.5 years. So congratulations to Indonesia for hosting such a tremendous event. I think this is such an incredibly important panel discussion. This whole idea of equity and inclusion is something that we really need to grapple with. And I think to tackle the problem, you have to first see the problem for what it really is. And on this topic, you know, we've talked about gender inclusion and equity. We've talked in other panels about racial inequity and also income inequality. And I think these are all very important issues that we need to grapple with. And on the topic of gender inequality, there are still globally 2.4 billion women who don't have the same economic rights as men. That's sort of incredibly profound and also very scary. On the topic of income inequality, the top 10% of the population's income is equivalent of the bottom, well, actually 30 times the equivalent of the bottom 50% population. So we have a huge issue as it relates to income inequality. And even today, after 3 years of the pandemic, 70% of the world's population is currently dealing with a reduced income equality. So that's a problem that we have to really look at head on in order to tackle it. On the topic of financial inclusion, Bob, there are, in my mind, 3 key issues that need to be tackled. The first is around awareness, the second is around pricing, and the third is around access. On the topic of awareness, the sad truth is that today, 1 in 3 people are financially literate globally. That means that there isn't a common basic understanding about how to manage financial affairs. And that's true not just in developing markets, but it's also true in developed markets. And from my perspective, I think the most important way to tackle that issue is to start education at the grassroots in schools. So one of the things that we're doing as an organization is to facilitate and foster the education of financial literacy in secondary education so that we can actually start very early. At the same time, we're trying to really develop more creative ways to educate the population through social media and so on and so forth. On the topic of pricing, most products across all industries are typically priced at the mass affluent because that's where companies can make the most money. The biggest pivot that I think we need to make in the business world is to play the long game, and that requires us to think about pricing products much more cheaply, but in some cases, they may not actually be profitable in the short term, but will facilitate, through the establishment of a relationship, more profitable selling to those customers in future years. That is a transformation shift that's going to be required for businesses to move beyond just looking at the next year or the next quarter's profitability, to be thinking about profitability in terms of 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So I think from a pricing perspective, we have to make products much more affordable, certainly in the financial space, so that we can actually make them more accessible to every consumer around the world. And then the third topic is that of awareness. And again, the sad truth is that there aren't enough people that get access to financial services and financial products. And again, there are 3 billion people in the world today that have never even accessed the internet. So from our perspective, we need to do a better job of creating access to digital technologies so that we can actually connect with every single consumer and every single person in the planet. So I think the third key driver to drive financial inclusion is to really improve the availability of digital tools and technologies to the masses so that they can actually transact with products that will actually help them fulfill their financial services needs. So I think this is a problem that needs both public and private partnership, and quite frankly, the business community needs to step up to do its part.
Very powerful. And maybe, Kathleen, I could take that notion of public-private partnership, and you've had a long history of leadership in Indonesia in particular. When you think about the role of large business versus, say, small business, and here we've talked a lot about MSMEs, and I pulled some data on MSMEs, and they're 99% of firms in the world, 70% of employment, but only 40% of GDP. And when you think about how to catalyze these smaller businesses' growth, I'd love your perspective on what role does large enterprise have, and then is it a go it alone, or is it done in some kind of collaboration, public-private?
Thanks, Bob, and thanks for your attention today. It's a great honor for me to be here, particularly in Indonesia and Bali. Indonesia is a very special place for our company. We have a big operation here that we've operated in for over 55 years now. And it's a great case study in inclusive and sustainable growth. We operate in Papua, and when we first arrived in Papua, it was an exploration project. We operate a large mine there, and there was not a trained workforce at all. And we had to develop one of the most technically challenging operations in the world. And so at first we brought in technical expertise from around the world, but over time, our Indonesian workforce, which is about 27,000 people, 98% Indonesian, is actually developing and operating one of the most complex operations in the world. And as we have developed over the years, that's provided a lot of opportunity, not only for our workforce, but communities where we operate. We're roughly 90% of the GDP of the Regency where our operations are located. We're roughly 40% of the GDP of the province of Papua. So we're very important. But what's happened over time is that with technology, with innovation, our workforce has been upskilled. They can now compete not only in Indonesia, but any operation around the world. And to Alan's point about fair wage and living wage, we make sure that it is a sustainable model where people can get rewarded on the job and support their families and have a prosperous future. So it's a great case study, a great model, and a lot of it revolves around public-private partnership. The Indonesian government now owns 51% of the shares of our Indonesian subsidiary, and it's a wonderful partnership in that we share risk and rewards, and we share a common alignment and vision for operations. So in the mining industry, you have to be resilient. There's ups and downs with commodity prices, but it's collaboration with communities, with all of our stakeholders that really wins the day on whether we're successful or not. And like I said, we've been operating here in Indonesia for over 55 years, and my guess is that there'll be another 55 years ahead of us. We'll see more and more women into the workplace, different kinds of jobs, digitalization, women doing different jobs that aren't traditional mining, a lot more science and technology and innovation coming into our business. So it's a great opportunity, not only for our company, but all stakeholders and all of our employees. Thank you very much.
It's an incredibly powerful example. You know, as we get close on time, we've covered a lot of ground in the first round, and I thought what I might do is rather than individual questions, is maybe ask you all the same question, which is, as you think of leaving B20, we think about this notion of driving growth that is inclusive. What's one hope that you have that actually comes out of these last 2 days? Maybe Alan, I could start with you.
The need for high quality economic growth to continue to lift people out of poverty and create prosperity cannot be decoupled from the challenge of a climate and nature emergency and rampant social inequality around the world. And my hope is that as we think about growth, we also think about the environmental and social impact of the growth that we're driving. And Bob, I'd like to commend you on the outstanding report that McKinsey published today that helps bring a framework to deal with those three issues together. That would be my hope.
Thank you. Marie?
Thank you. My hope is that we can achieve green and blue, resilient and inclusive growth. Growth without these three dimensions is not going to be resilient or helping us to deal with the future, including climate change, including addressing the reversal of development that we experience with these multiple crises, human capital being one of them. So there's a huge reversal in human capital, including on women that we talked about earlier. This has to be addressed and prioritized, as with climate. With climate, we are already in crisis. You cannot reverse it. The inaction is going to lead to increased vulnerability and increased lack of inclusiveness, because it hits the vulnerable and the poor the most. So we need, I agree totally with Alan that we need to really address climate, but at the same time development. So we can do it. And I heard a lot of good ideas at the B20 here. Let's just do it and implement.
Hear, hear. Roy?
Look, Bob, I'm incredibly optimistic. I think over the course of the last couple of days, what I've heard through various panels and discussions is that there is a meeting of the minds, there is a common agreed viewpoint that we can't deal with this big issue unless we all lean in and do our part. And I think that includes a realization that, yes, we do need growth. This is how we will create equity for many and opportunity for many, but we have to do it in a sustainable way and in a way that actually deals with some of the underlying problems of equity and inequity and issues of inclusion. And I don't think there is anyone that thinks that there is step one, dealing with growth, and then step two, dealing with a sustainable future, and one with equity and inclusion as an afterthought. I think there is a common appreciation, whether it's government, whether it's the private sector, whether it's business leaders, and whether it's, quite frankly, every individual, that we have to, A, lean in, but then more importantly, we have to tackle all three together: sustainability, growth, and equity and inclusion.
Thank you. Kathleen.
I agree with what all the other panelists said. I would just add that I think it's going to take ongoing collaboration between the public and private sectors to push this forward in a practical, reasonable way, and a way that all of us can execute it. I think everybody's heart is in it. We've all got to collaborate together and figure out how we go about executing.
Just wanted to first say a heartfelt thanks to all of you. Alan, Marie, Roy, Kathleen. We've covered a lot of ground, from the notion of what is equitable compensation to access for all, to the notion of financial inclusion and the power of the markets, small business, the notion of working together. And my takeaway is it's time for the courage of the and as we think about solutions. We have to have a decade that grows, but it has to grow in a way that is inclusive and sustainable. Sustainable, inclusive growth. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Bob Sternfels, Global Managing Director of McKinsey & Company, for moderating this inspirational and eye-opening sessions. And there are many insights and also data we can gain. One is from Mr. Alan Job. By 2030, everyone in Unilever's value chain, especially suppliers, must pay fair living wage to their employees. And he argued that employees who are paid properly not only would stay and work better, but most importantly, we will create a healthy society. And it's really interesting as well to point out what Ms. Mari Elka Pangestu said about women suffered more during the pandemic. I think we all agree with this. They experienced massive layoff and stay longer out of the job market. And they eat less during the pandemic because they would prioritize their families instead of themselves. And a recent data that I got recently, according to a research published on been disproportionately affected by job losses, particularly women found that women have also been disproportionately affected. Worldwide, women lost more than 64 million jobs in 2020 alone, resulting in an estimated $800 billion loss on income. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for us to move on to the next agenda. It is the keynote address by the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia to give her remarks about restoring global economy through innovative partnership. Without further ado, please welcome Her Excellency Ms. Sri Mulyani.
Thank you so much. All Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen from the B20 Summit. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation for inviting me for this very important meeting. This is really a remarkable after pandemic, and we have now able to host you here. This is, and I can see the remarkable room full after pandemic, and all of you. I do hope that your business is going to continue prosper, and I can see that growing, the room just like what we just discussed in this panel. All of you, I do hope that your business is going to be continue prosper So
growing,
allow me
just
to
like what
have
we
this
just discussed in
keynote
this panel.
speech. I'm actually asking Sinta, and this is maybe almost the end of your session, so maybe you just want to wrap and going out and then enjoy the beach, having a coffee with your friends. But believe me that my speech is going to be important for you and your business.
Believe me that my speech is going to be important for you and your business.
So bear me a little bit with this one.
So bear me a little bit.
I think we all agree that the global economy has been facing extremely difficult challenges, leading to a deterioration of the growth prospect, with higher probability of recession in many countries. The COVID-19 has created this kind of very unique and challenging situation for recovery. Our ability to manage, especially in managing the spread of the COVID with the vaccine, are able to at least creating a momentum of recovery. But we still cannot let our guard down as global economic risks have been shifted toward various economic shocks that threatening the global economic environment. As we are all following that the IMF has projected that the economic growth significantly decelerated from 6% projected in 2021, 6% which is already achieved, now to only 3.2% in 2022, and further deteriorated to 2.7% in 2023. The consistent downward revision of global outlook from all international institutions have marked the increasing risk we face this year. Multiple factors have fueled this condition, factors such as the war in Ukraine that has aggravated the already soaring inflationary pressure, and the slowdown in the big economy, including China, and much tighter monetary policy to fight inflation. The major near-term challenges becoming much more complex and highly interrelated. Prolonged high inflationary pressure, energy and food insecurity, down inflation should become the main focus to avoid longer-term damage and restore stability. The situation lately is so delicate that confidence in the financial sector and market and overall economy can be easily deterred if we are not carefully with our policy formulation.
And many policymakers are actually now facing with a very narrow room to maneuver,
whether this is fiscally
and monetary.
At least
for
in
us,
Indonesia case,
we are working very closely together between fiscal policy and monetary policy in a synchronized and harmonized way. The policy needs to continue to be well calibrated, well planned, well communicated, sometimes quickly adjusted, but still need to be continued consistent and credible. We also need to effectively use all variable tools to prevent economic confidence failing further. We have to provide well-targeted support, and especially because of the policy space becoming limited, it should be more targeted, especially in protecting the poor and vulnerable. So I'm glad I'm hearing the panel just before my speech that many big companies like Unilever, Freeport, really hopefully looking more in the inclusive growth of your company. This is aligned well with also the government, who try to continue maintaining the momentum of the recovery through inclusive policy
formulation and policy tool, using our fiscal space selectively, especially in managing the shock and protecting the vulnerable. So I do hope the CEO of the B20 summit here, you are all also using your corporate space to really creating a better inclusive growth. We also have to provide appropriate support for productive activity, because at the end of the day, the economy, which is growing, will require and will need increasing productivity, and sometimes the innovation which is not yet sure but need to be supported, and improvement of the business climate so that job creation remain happening and the economic growth continue to be sustained. For Indonesia, we are continue maintaining the optimism, but at the same time also keep vigilance with a very dynamic global environment. Optimism is still important, while at the same time, vigilance has to be warranted. This is the mindset of Indonesia economic policy maker. We are not scaring you by saying that we need to be vigilant. Vigilance means that you have to prepare for any possibility, any eventuality, and you are not actually deterred by this any possibility. You are focused and you continue recalibrated your policy choices. Our economic recovery continue progressing. As you can see, our third quarter growth is 5.72%. This is slightly higher than what the government own expectation. We have already continued growing above 5% for 4 consecutive quarters, from last quarter 2021 and continue to 2022 third quarter. The continued strong economic recovery has been supported by our strong domestic demand, especially on a consumption, but also now followed by the recovery of the investment. But we also quite lucky enjoying the buoyancy of the export growth. Our effective pandemic handling and various policy support, both to demand, especially in the form of social assistance and subsidy, has protected the economy and the people from a huge shock, including food and energy prices. On the other hand, we also using our policy tool to support the supply side. This is in the form of tax relief, some incentive, and also in this case, financing support. Combination of these two should be always in the right blend, because the economy is not in one simple challenge or problem. So we have to continue recalibrated our policy, selective, targeted, but also at the same time be very pragmatic. Stronger economic activity has sustained and improved our labor market condition. The unemployment rate, which is increased to 6.5% in August 2021, now has been declined to 5.9% in August 2022. This is a good record from both growth as well as the inclusiveness of this growth, including also in poverty reduction. But we are not, in this case, complacent with this good, strong achievement. We continue working hard, focusing on the new emerging risk which is coming from the global economy. Price stability is one of the most important and strategic focus at this very moment. This is not only the work of the monetary policy, because we understand that the price increase, it is not only coming from aggressive aggregate demand, but also coming from the supply disruption. So we try to be very meticulous in deciding and designing which instrument should addressing the area of the aggregate demand expansion using the monetary policy, light increasing interest rate, and a little bit tightening. But mostly we are going to be also addressing the issue on the supply side, whether this is on the stock, logistical, distribution, and of course availability. With those kind of coordination, which is even led by President Jokowi himself, together with the leaders of the region, like governor and mayor, as well as using tools, both fiscal and monetary side. On the fiscal side, we even providing reward for a governor or municipal mayor that can beat the inflation in a much aggressive way, even below the national inflation level. We reward it by real money, so it's not just giving piagam. And that's really powerful because we're announcing to the public that make everybody focus on how we are going to address the potential price increase which is coming from disruption in the supply side. With that effort, our inflation is actually slowing down to 5.7%. This is even after the government increasing the fuel price by 30% back in September. We even have deflation in the food from September as well as in October. That kind of collaboration between non-conventional policy with the conventional policy instrument is really needed when we are facing with this very complex and challenging task. The government will continue to step up effort to continuously boost the recovery, while at the same time we also preserving stability amid the very increasing and elevating external risk. We also strengthening our collaboration and coordination with the Monetary Authority, Bank Indonesia, and Financial Sector Authority like OJK and Deposit Insurance in the Financial System Stability Committee. We look carefully how this global economic dynamic and risk can affect the stability of our financial system. We learn a lot from 97-98 financial crisis and 2008-2009 global financial crisis. On the fiscal side, we will continue committed to gradual fiscal consolidation. This is the bedrock of the credibility of macro policy. This is not ideology, but this is necessary condition for Indonesia to continue move forward in a sustainable and credible way. We are now enjoying some commodity boom revenue, and we are going to save some of it in order for us to be able to create a safety net for 2023, which is becoming even more unpredictable. So, ladies and gentlemen, despite the resiliency of the Indonesia economy, we continue calling for collective global action, because the nature of the problem that the global economy is facing is actually the one that cannot be addressed and overcome by any country alone. When you talk about pandemic, climate change, or even digital technology that can provide opportunity, but also sometimes also a risk in terms of instability, and of course, geopolitics. Within the G20 presidency, we continue maintaining this spirit of cooperation and collaboration. The spirit of peace, solidarity, multilateralism that should need to be continued strengthened. Differences in terms of position should not breaking the spirit of cooperation. We use this G20 presidency to continue communicating that the world needs even more cooperation rather than divided. This is good not only for the G20, but also for the whole world. And alhamdulillah, in this case, as a finance minister, we were able to deliver a finance track with all very tangible and concrete result, which can hopefully creating a confidence not only to the G20 forum, but also for the global economy. We are hoping that this week, the Leaders Summit is going to also providing with this kind of result that can restore and strengthen the confidence of the global economy. In this case, I would like to express my appreciation for the B20 as one of the most prominent engagement group in G20. You've been also engaging very actively. Business, networking, and relationship is actually the one who can soften the tension at the geopolitical level as well as security threat. I do hope that the B20 will continue maintaining this spirit of collaboration and cooperation and voicing that to the world and especially to the leaders. Your role and your voice is very, very important. This case, Indonesia also continue in performing the G20 presidency, listen to the private partners on challenge and how we can promote partnership in a better way. We noted some challenges in the area of long-term priority and targets, data and standard, the need to a better enabling environment, and capacity to invest in innovation. The four main challenges require a collaboration effort between the government, private sector, donors, as well as MDB. The G20 delivered the framework on how to best leverage private sector participation, particularly to scale up sustainable infrastructure investment. The infrastructure funding and sustainability financing, those very, very important for all countries, whether you are advanced country, emerging country, or low-income country. I believe B20 has thought on how we can improve our way of having a partnership in order to accelerate economic development. The message we have heard today will be also critical to the next stage of our work and also for the next presidency of G20. We hope we can continue explore many creative ways to advance innovative, inclusive, and collaborative growth. Inclusivity cannot be attained with just the discussion. It needs to be implemented, and we should use all the tools, instruments, as well as our affirmative action in order for us to be able to achieve higher growth, better quality, and more inclusive as well as equitable. I would like to thank B20 for having me to provide this speech at the later of this afternoon. I do hope that you are all having a very productive meeting continuously as well as enjoying Bali while you stay here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bu Sri Mulyani, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia. A very powerful message indeed, that collective global action is needed because no country can deal with this crisis alone, and the world needs more cooperation rather than division. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving forward to the next session, it is a pleasure for me to call upon the Executive Chairman of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change to deliver his remarks virtually with the topic Investing in Inclusive Growth for a Resilient Future. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Tony Blair.
Good morning from me. Good afternoon to you. It's a real honor and privilege to be able to address these words at the B20 conference. to start by saying a big congratulations to President Jokowi and all the Indonesian government for the tremendous leadership they've shown through the G20 process, and also to say to the B20, with whom my institute has worked closely, well done. You've set a new standard, I think, for B20 gatherings, and it's a real pleasure to be with you all. So the title of this is Inclusive Growth for a Resilient Future. And we start, I think, with this context. Today, growth and inclusivity go together. Now, maybe in the 19th century industrial revolution, that wasn't always the case, where people could use unskilled labor to produce goods and machinery. But today, we're living through a new revolution, a 21st century technology revolution. And there, the premium is on people who are educated, are capable of developing the skills for the future, and who understand the way this technology revolution will operate. So what that means is the following. Number one, we need to use the talents of all the people. That's why discrimination today, whether on the grounds of gender or race or religion, is not just morally wrong. It also negates the possibility of growth. We need to use all the skills of all the people, and that includes our women as well. So the important thing today is to recognize that we live in an entirely new economy. Use the talents of all the people means also educating the people, educating them well, educating them to a high level of achievement. And to do that education requires an understanding of this technology revolution. Because the second point is that technology today is going to change everything. The way we live, the way we work, the way we think, the way we interact with each other. And it changes not just the way manufacturing works and services work, but it also changes agriculture through irrigation, through new types of seed, through the ability, through technology, to access markets more efficiently. And if we want to utilize that technology revolution, then the third thing we need is connectivity. So we need the infrastructure available to allow people to be joined up. We need electricity and power, including for the hundreds of millions of people in the world who don't presently have it. If you take the Pelapa Ring project, for example, in Indonesia, not so very far from where you are, that's producing connectivity for a population that doesn't have it. It opens up opportunity for them. This, therefore, means higher growth, but it requires investment. And investment not just in things like education and infrastructure, but the fourth point is healthcare becomes an important part of an inclusive economy. We've seen through COVID how much damage a pandemic can do, not just to people's health, 15 million excess deaths worldwide, but to our economic performance. Trillions of dollars lost through the pandemic. And the World Bank estimates that if we produce better health, it will add trillions more to the global economy. So good health equals better productivity equals higher growth. Our campaign that we've been working on with the B20 in Indonesia, which is called the One-Shot Campaign, it's about how you utilize the whole new generation of drugs and injectables to mean that we produce better healthcare for people, particularly in the developing world. That's an example of how, by utilizing the best available healthcare today, we produce more growth and more inclusive growth. However, the fifth point is we know something else. And that is today the changes in climate are producing greater inequality and poorer outcomes in health. This is why we have to aim today to make our growth as green and sustainable as possible, because that is going to be the future. Climate change hits the poorest in the world hardest. You can see this today if you look at the Horn of Africa and the drought, and therefore the displacement of people, people going without food, people dying as a result of not having access to water. So the growth that we produce, if it is to be inclusive, has also got to be sustainable. And six, for all of this, we need a thriving partnership between the public and the private sector. One of the interesting things that Sri Mulyana just talked to you about was how it's important to have this spirit of cooperation operating not just at an international level, but also within countries. Today, we know that if countries open up to each other more through trade, it produces jobs, it produces better outcomes. But we also know that within countries, it's important that spirit of cooperation is there between the public sector with its weight and its ability to influence policy, and the private sector with its enterprise and its commitment to good business. So ensuring that we get a good business environment, one in which people can start businesses and thrive, that is also an essential part of higher growth and growth that is inclusive. And so this is the way that we give ourselves the best chance of ensuring that we produce growth, but growth that involves as many people as possible from all different walks of life and all different parts of our economy. And if you look at the nations that have made it to first world status, then by and large, we don't always succeed, but we're always striving to ensure that as many people as possible are included in our economy. And this is also the route to political stability, because if people feel they have a stake in the future, if people feel that the economy is not just for a small group of people at the top, but for a broad mass of people, if they think if they work hard, they can do well, they can succeed, that gives them a stake in the future. That gives them the ability to think this economy is for me and not just for others. And there is where I have to congratulate Indonesia for the changes they're making over the past few years. And it's a great example of how with the right political leadership under President Jokowi, a country can make real progress. For example, the new capital city at Nusantara is precisely in order to make sure that the development of Indonesia in the future is not limited to Java and to Jakarta, to the big traditional urban areas. And then we have the hugely imaginative plan that Indonesia has for combining growth and clean energy. So Kadin, the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce, have produced an idea for a green energy fund. If you look at the electric vehicle chain, LG Energy Solutions is making a $10 billion investment into the battery sector. 70% of the nickel is going to be processed in Indonesia, and there's a huge factory being built at Karawang. So this is a classic example of a country using its resources to produce growth in a sustainable way that will also be inclusive. So I think at this moment in time, despite all the headwinds the global economy faces, if you take a step back and look at the broad sweep of history, it's very clear that the times through which we're living now require governments to commit to growth that is inclusive, that utilizes all the talents, that allows people to access the benefits of the technology revolution, that creates the right infrastructure, pays attention to healthcare, has the climate and the climate changes at the very center of policymaking, and within all of that, has that spirit of cooperation between public and private sector and between countries together forming the global community. So I think this is a really important moment for the B20 to have this conference. I really do think it's done a magnificent job in putting together the elements that go to make up for a better 21st century for all of us. And I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege and honor for my institute to work with the B20 and indeed with the Indonesian government to be part of this exciting story. I know there'll be a lot of other things that may overshadow parts of the G20 this year, but this agenda developed in Indonesia is one of the most exciting things that's happened in the international community for many years, and I commend the B20 for it. Thank you very much.
The Executive Chairman of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, former British Prime Minister, Mr. Tony Blair. Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, after a very long and insightful keynote and also panel discussions, now we'll be having a very short coffee break, and you're welcome to enjoy the coffee and snacks at the mezzanine floor. And please come back by 4:30 p.m. It is really important for us to come back to this ballroom by 4:30 p.m. because we will be listening to 3 state leaders speaking before us. Prime Minister of Canada, His Excellency Mr. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Australia, His Excellency Mr. Anthony Albanese, and of course, the host President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Joko Widodo. Once again, please do enjoy your coffee and also snack at the mezzanine floor. And please, we'd like to have your cooperation and be on time to return to this ballroom by 4:30 p.m. Thank you very much for the cooperation.